Hello, intrepid interstellar travelers. Welcome to District 216, the intersection of art, music, cannabis, and psychedelics. Today, I'm very lucky to have Jess Starwood. She's a super fascinating person. She's a master mycologist, an author, a chef, an herbalist, and an expert forager. She holds a master's degree of science in herbal medicine and holistic nutrition. She wrote and photographed her first book, Mushroom Wanderland, a forager's guide to finding, identifying, and using more than 25 wild fungi. She also forages for mushrooms for Michelin star restaurants, and she's even been featured in National Geographic, The Guardian, and the Orange County Register. So can we have a warm round of applause for Jess Starwood?
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here tonight.
And we're super excited to have you. This is our first mycologist, which is pretty cool, a mushroom expert, amongst other things. And so, however, she's going to give us a presentation at the end of my little interview. But we're going to first start out, our fourth pillar is psychedelics. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your psychedelic journey, the evolution, what initially piqued your interest in these fascinating compounds?
Yeah. So I think the first time I learned about psychedelics and was introduced to this idea that you could take something to alter your reality or perception of reality. I was in high school, and I remember sitting in my English class, and there was a couple students sitting around me, and they started talking about going to the club and taking some drugs, and all these different things that happen, and you feel really good, and it's really great. And I was like, I want to do that too. But as a kid, I was extremely shy. I didn't have too many friends. I didn't really talk to anybody. In my earlier years, my teachers would call my parents and say, I don't think she knows how to talk. I don't think she can speak. We need to intervene. I was very shy. I didn't know how to interact with people. I didn't know how to make friends. And then so I remember just listening to these kids talking about, partying and at the time it's called ecstasy. I was like, oh, I want to try that. That sounds like fun. Maybe I could actually get out of the way of myself of connecting with other people and talking to somebody and making friends. But I didn't know how to do that. So fast forward probably 10 years from there or more, a little more than that maybe. I got married very early and was not happy. I had 2 kids, very young kids, and I started learning about herbalism, and they just very interested in plants and like, okay, so these plants can alter our health, our well-being, and so I started to learn about a plant that actually grew right around town. It was known to be used by native people to, invoke visions and change of perception. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. That's very interesting. And I knew it had a dark side, though, this plant. And in my particular situation, my ex-husband was very controlling, very not open to any sort of plant medicine or anything like that. But I was so drawn to I need something to help change my reality. Something needed to happen. So I heard about Datura, which is it's more of a deliriant than a really good psychedelic. So, but I was at a point of desperation, in my life where I needed out of the relationship. I needed out of my mental space where I was. And so one day I took a couple seeds. Before going to bed, I ate them. And the next day, I mean, it wasn't it's more of like a microdose of Datura. So it wasn't a full-on crazy delirium that goes on for a couple of days, which can happen with that. So I definitely don't recommend a large dose of it. Yeah, that was my first experience.
Would you mind for the audience just saying a little bit more about Datura? How many of you, could you raise your hands, are familiar with Jimson weed or Bruggemansia or Datura? Okay. Those are varieties of, I believe, Datura, right?
Yeah.
What's the family or?
So Datura is the genus name. There's a lot of different species. In Southern California, it's called Datura wrightii, and also known as Jimson weed. You'll see them. I just drove here from Arizona this morning, and I saw lots on the side of the highway. They have these big trumpet-like white flowers. Sometimes they're called moonflowers. They show up at this time of year. And very beautiful flower, kind of purple on the inside, very white on the outside. They can get fairly large. The bushes themselves can get fairly large as well. And I was just very attracted to this plant. And after they've been pollinated, the plant produces these thorny little round balls that hold the seeds. And the whole plant has psychotropic effects. But the seeds, I was taught by a friend of mine, he kind of just experimented with them and was like, you can try a couple seeds. It's not going to be too bad. And like, you know what? I'm just going to try it. It's available. It's what was there. So, it's it's in the nightshade family. So does have definitely some darker side to it. Taking a larger dose, you can kind of lose your mind. I've heard of people who never get back to where they were before they took it. They kind of go crazy. It's not so great. Native people do use it as a kind of a rite of passage into adulthood, and like whatever happens during this experience, that's what you're supposed to do in life. It gives you your direction. And I think for me at that point, I was probably, I want to say I was probably 30 years old when I took it, and so it's 10 years ago. And the plant told me that I needed to study and share plants. And mushrooms kind of came out of that as well, but started with plants and herbalism and teaching people about them.
Well, for such a black belt plant that I was always very afraid of Datura personally, because it's like the ultimate shaman medicine. And so once you had that eye-opening experience and you had some direction, what was the rest of your psychedelic journey? What was the progression?
Well, so like I said, I didn't have a whole lot of resources. I didn't have any connections to get any other mushrooms or even cannabis at that time. I had no way of getting it. I had no friends who were involved with it. It just seemed like this completely out of touch thing. So I resorted to yoga, meditation, and shamanism, and really obsessively dived into that. And I got to a point where through meditation and through shamanism and going on shamanic journeys, through just drumming and music and deep meditation, unassisted by any other substance, I could get to that point where on mushrooms, how you have that feeling of love for everything around you, I got to that point on my own. And it was a very life-changing experience in that way. You know, I talked to my spiritual guides on my shamanic journeys, which, you know, you get yourself into such a state that your subconscious starts to talk to you and guides you and suggests things, and it's like, oh yeah, I need something different in this lifetime. This is not the path I'm supposed to be on. So that then brought me into getting a divorce, living on my own for the first time in my entire life, and living as a single mom for 7 years, traveling, writing books, and just doing what I'm doing now. It was like I had to give myself permission to do this, but that journey helped. Shortly after the divorce, though, I did run into mushrooms, and microdosing was starting to come about, and I was like, I think I need to do that. So started microdosing, and that shifted a lot for me. And then doing a couple of a lot larger doses, 4 to 5 grams. And even though I'm still a little nervous right now, I'm here in front of people talking. I've been on TV. I've been on radio shows. I've been on podcasts. Like, this is not the same person that was getting their parents called saying, she doesn't talk. She doesn't speak. We have a problem. She needs to see the psychiatrist. And so my social anxiety, I still have it for sure, but it gave me a way to move past it and use that tool to do what I do now, to teach classes with, large amounts of people, to really share my experiences with others, to help others connect to the environment themselves and all the happy things that I share.
So while you were cultivating these various practices and engaging in psychedelic experiences, was there any overlap of spirituality, or how would you characterize your connection potentially to the divine, and how was that enhanced or further fortified with your chemical exploration?
Yeah. So as far as, spirituality, I don't say that I'm a hugely spiritual person. Definitely not religious at all. But taking, especially mushrooms, there is, for me, definitely something greater, and that for me is nature and the outdoors and the universe and everything that exists, out there is within us. And, taking mushrooms definitely strengthened and supported that. I'm very, very science-based. I have a lot of understanding of how the body works, how nature works, how the interaction between chemicals in our things we take into our body connect and affects us, how our food affects us, how our environment affects us. And yeah, there's a whole scientific reason behind all of that, but there's definitely things we don't understand. There's everything in the universe is connected, and I definitely feel this spiritual connection to the world around us, to nature, and that would be it.
Well, similarly, do you think that there's anything objective and consistent that's accessed through these various perceptual changes that come about through the ingestion of psilocybin or, say, LSD or other various entheogens? entities as well. I mean, entities are always tossed around. I guess they could be called deities. Do you buy
Mm-hmm.
into any of that through the scientific lens, or do you think they're machinations of your neurochemistry?
Well, yes, I feel like it's these deities or these beings that we are visited by are the best our brain can come up with, as far as, our higher self, our subconscious, our inner wisdom of, like, we get so wrapped up in our thoughts and like, oh, I need to do this in my life, but I can't do that because of this. But then there's this like subconscious self that we have that we don't always listen to. It's like, I know I shouldn't do this, but, and to really get into listening to that in these experiences, I think they show up as beings because that's what our brain recognizes. Our brain recognizes people and faces and beings. That's what we're designed to recognize.
So like subconscious projections, or
exactly.
potentially, your mind speaks in archetypes that can kind of transcend populations and cultures, stuff along those lines. Is that what you're saying?
Totally. Absolutely. I mean, I really haven't had a whole lot of entity experiences, except for one where there was this gray being that had these slits for eyes, and it just told me, it was like, you need to move on. You have a different path than what you're on today. And I was like, all right. I guess I need to sign those divorce papers and move on.
So with all of your experience then, how would you say you can cultivate the best experience or get the most out of a psychedelic journey? You did mention as well that you've helped facilitate journeys in Mexico. So I'm sure you've watched people go through things. How do you get the most out of one of those experiences?
Definitely set and setting is going to be the biggest important thing. I've worked on and off with intention. Sometimes it works for people having like, I have this problem in my life and I need to know what to do. And, people are looking for an answer. But sometimes going in without an intention is better because those problems, you already know what the problem is. Your subconscious is going to maybe have a suggestion for you. But going in with an open mind, no expectations, and every experience is going to be different. Every person's going to be different, and just starting out with like, hey, I'm here to receive information if it's willing to come to me.
And when you mention spirit guides, do you mean spirit guides that are external that help kind of guide these experiences potentially? Or do you mean kind of subconscious projections that manifest as insightful aids to one's journey? Yeah,
more of a personification of our subconscious. And working in the shamanism side of things first, and exploring that. This was before I had my science degree and really understood the body a lot more. And I was like, yeah, sure. There was this being that told me this, and it's whatever works for you. Everybody, if they believe in having a spirit guide that they see every single time, and they're like, I'm going to go talk to my spirit animal or spirit friend or whoever this is. It's just a projection of your subconscious. And if that's what works for you, then that's what's going to come up.
Would you describe yourself as a materialist? It's okay if you're a materialist.
I mean, I like material things,
No,
as
a
far
materialist.
as-
No, it's not like you like material possessions. It's like a philosophical standpoint where you believe that everything that exists you can see and measure and quantify, and that there's nothing that exists in say a realm beyond the tangible and visible.
I'm on the fence. I
Agnostic.
I would like to think that there's more to it all. I would like to think that, there's other realms. I feel like there's definitely a good chance there's a multiverse. There's other realms other timelines that we may be able to access. I'm pretty fascinated with a lot of, the space, time, and exploring different realities, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not, I don't have a great answer for that.
Well, and the
Which
reason
is
I
good.
ask is you were using the word shamanism, and when I think of shamanism, I mean, potentially you're talking about like an internal alchemy of sorts, but would you further describe what shamanism is to you and how one practices shamanism? Because it almost seems predicated on something beyond assisting us, but is it an internal process, or how would you describe it?
I would say it's a very internal thing. Some people go way off on that word and go a different direction, and they're like, I'm the healer, I'm the shaman, I'm going to bestow my wisdom onto you and heal you. That, for me, that's not what it's about. It's more of your own personal connection to your subconscious, and your subconscious it has your highest good in as the interest, best interest. So tapping into that to me is shamanism. It's tapping into your inner wisdom and knowledge that you can't really get to in your regular day-to-day consciousness. It's dropping down into those, I believe it's theta waves, and where things can arise that maybe you haven't thought of in a while, or you haven't quite put all those pieces together, and psychedelics can help put those pieces together, and then all of a sudden it looks like a new idea.
So continuing with something we talked about before about, not guardian angels, but guides or something like that. If you're taking large amounts of psychedelics, you should be careful about the skeletons you have in your closet. Like 500 mics, the skeletons might come out and, smash you around or gangbang you or something awful. What would you have to say about kind of that shadow notion or the confrontation of inner demons and how those difficult processes that reside within someone's subconscious potentially, percolate up into consciousness, and how one resolves them with the assistance of these medicines?
Definitely, we all have our shadows. We all have our things that we don't want to acknowledge that are part of us. With everything light, there's something dark. I feel like a lot of traumas are part of our darkness as well, and they can get lodged in the body, stuck in the body, and I actually had a very recent experience with that, where I took something that was supposed to go a completely different direction, and instead it brought up a lot of past traumas that I had been holding on to, and the experience was not good. It was not a enjoyable experience at all. And turned into some paranoias a couple days later. And all those things just surfaced for a couple days, to where I could literally feel it in my body, but I feel like it was being pulled out. When we hold on to emotional traumas, physical traumas, like I said, they get stuck in the body. They can end up causing disease and problems in our lives if we don't address them. Whether it's through psychotherapy or psychedelic sessions where we're working on those things. And then, after these things came up, reliving a lot of these things in my mind and kind of coming to peace with them, I felt a relief and a happiness that I thought that was not there before the session.
Well, and there's that line. It's quite hackneyed. It's a cliched in many ways, but there's no such thing as a bad trip. I mean, would you echo that? Is that what you just told me?
That's what I just told you.
Or have you had some really bad trips that were 100% bad trips?
That was,
no questions asked.
That was my worst one. And even though, at the end of it, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to continue on in life. This is how bad it was. And the sadness and the just despair that came from there was overwhelming, to where I'm like, really, this is it? This is what it's all about, is right here. And that feeling. And it, kept working on it for the next couple days, and came out better than I went in.
It's a happy ending. I've always thought if you've never had a bad trip, you haven't taken enough.
I would agree with that.
But that's just my opinion. So you are an master herbalist, well practiced, quite esteemed. Are there any awesome plants out there that most people don't know about that can get us high in a good way? Or even in a way in which we should just not, there's certain ones just don't explore. They're not worth it. I don't know, nutmeg. I know nutmeg's a deliriant. You can take large amounts and have a psychedelic experience, or Syrian rue, or blue lotus, white lily, kanna.
I really love blue lotus. That's a great one.
Do you smoke it, or do you drink the tea?
I drink it as a tea, a concentrate, a 20 times concentrate powder. It's great. I've great dreams off of that. But one that most people don't know about, which I'm quite interested in trying someday, is saguaro cactus. So, in Arizona, the classic saguaro cactus. It actually is psychoactive, and a lot of people don't know that. There's not a ton of information out there, but I was taught by somebody who did an interview with me a couple years ago, and he's like, hey, off record, he's like, I know you're from Arizona. Do you know anything about saguaro cactus? And I'm like, the fruit are really tasty. I don't know. And he's like, well, yeah, well, I had one of the most unusual trips of my life by eating the flesh of the saguaro cactus. So I haven't tried it yet, but that's on my list.
How do you spell that?
Saguaro?
We can look it up afterwards. I think that's awesome. I'd love to find a new cactus. But is it a mescaline based?
I would imagine so.
Okay, so it's likely mescaline, just like San Pedro or Peruvian torch or any of those. Potentially it would even be legal. I mean, it would be legal then too to cultivate, right?
Considering it takes, 50 years for them to get this tall, sure,
Long-term investment.
It's a long-term, yeah.
So then lastly, to kind of finish off, is actually, let's see. Actually, I think we're probably about time for the change your lens question. So for you who haven't been here, we have the change your lens question. So every time we have a new guest, we ask them the standard District216 change your lens questions, because we wanted a bunch of different people's opinions on the same question. So the first question, what person or book most inspired you? And it can be the top 3. It doesn't have to be the ultimate. But
as far as what I do with my life right now, the most influential book was a book I read in 3rd grade called My Side of the Mountain by Jean Craighead George. And it's a story about a boy who runs away to the forest in the Catskill Mountains of New York and lives in a tree. And he fishes, he collects herbs and plants, and he lives out there for, I believe, over a year through the snow and everything. And I read that and I was like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. Of course, I grew up in the middle of Phoenix, Arizona, in the desert, and running away to the desert probably wasn't a good idea with 120 degrees out. But I figure, now's my running away to the forest time of my life. I get to do that quite often. So,
question number 2. Are we living in a simulation?
I believe there's a high chance of it.
Percentage-wise? Bank of America said 52%. So what do you wager?
I'm going to say 75%.
Nice.
But also, I feel like this here is totally a simulation. We're just simulating life out in nature. We're creating, it's not real. This isn't real. Real life is out in nature. That's real. We're just simulating things to create a new reality, a reality that maybe we want. We want it to look like this, but when you go outside into nature, that's, we say we're going outside, but is that actually inside? Ooh.
Alan Watts had a really great line that it reminded me of, which is in nature everything's wiggly. There's no straight lines in nature. Anyways, moving on to the next. Do you believe in an after? We kind of covered this, but do you believe in an afterlife, and do you think that psychedelics potentially give us some insight into what happens once we die?
I believe that everything in the universe has always been in the universe, so it's just a change of form. It's a change of a collection of molecules. Whether the consciousness follows us elsewhere or that it has been here before. I do feel like there's some sort of timeline jumping that can happen, and different types of experiences that may alter the next reincarnation or revisit to this reality, this timeline. I don't know. I hope so. I'm would like to give it another go around.
I agree with that. Me too. Or maybe I can get off the samsara wheel. Who knows? So, is there a substance that you haven't tried that you would very much like to, or a substance that you've tried that you never want to touch again?
Well, I would like to try saguaro, just because that's where I'm from. I feel, I'm very connected to it. There's one that grows at my parents' house that maybe that's the one. And I would probably I don't think I'd ever try Datura again. I've gotten that message loud and clear, and I'm ready to move on.
So is there a medicine, following up, is there a medicine that you've tried that you'd say you're the most interested in? You're like, oh, that's the one. I think that's really mine.
I feel like mushrooms are, psilocybin mushrooms work very well with me. Those would feel like they're closer to me than in my, I definitely want to try some other things like DMT would be interesting. And I've done LSD once, but it would be difficult to top that experience, I think.
So the most profound psychedelic experience you've ever had?
The one that I was just talking about that brought up all of my shadow parts was quite profound. That may top it all, and I'll have to say it was it was last week. So I think I still have more to learn from what I got out of that. So I think life-changing, maybe it's going to lead somewhere different.
So in the context of the psychedelic renaissance, what are you most excited for?
That people who need these substances will be able to get them. I wished that I had this opportunity much earlier in my life. I certainly probably never would have married at 20 years old to somebody that was a very poor fit for me. I feel like I would have been able to cultivate my art career a lot better than what I did. But, you know, I had no access to them. There was no way I could find them, you know, being in a very sheltered position where I wasn't at my life. But yeah, that's what's exciting for me, is hopefully to get the people, and, you know, I've seen it help people immensely, you know, even, you know, just myself changing things for my life, but for others as well. You know, there's people with severe depression and anxiety and, you know, mental health problems that I think could really benefit from them.
And lastly, my favorite question, in 60 seconds, what is the nature of consciousness?
Is the timer started?
I have a watch.
Shoot. See, this is a question that I was kind of stuck on, because, you know, consciousness, it's a result of chemical reactions in our brain, you know, and versus stimulus. It's and our surroundings. And are we actually something individual, or are we a collective of consciousness? I don't know. It's a possibility. It's hopefully can be transmuted from physical body to the next physical body. Maybe, hopefully. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
That was perfectly 60 seconds. That was
Great.
very good. You were right on time. So now Jess is going to give us a presentation.
All right, so I'm going to be talking tonight about connection. And ultimately, in all of my classes and in my teachings, that's what we're all after. And if you remember when I was talking about my story, that's what I was also after as a very young person, was connection. And subtitle here, Finding the Way Back to Nature, Our Community, and Ourselves. Starting off here with just a quote. One of my most favorite quotes, kind of goes along with everything we talked about. We are travelers on a cosmic journey, stardust swirling and dancing in the eddies and whirlpools of infinity. Life is eternal. We have stopped for a moment to encounter each other, to meet, to love, to share. This is a precious moment. It is a little parenthesis in eternity. That's by Paulo Coelho from The Alchemist, another one of my favorite books. We already talked about who I am and what I do, but we talked a little bit about my story already. I was always connected to nature. My parents took me camping as a kid. We were always just out there. Their idea of a camping trip was that if you haven't seen anybody as we're driving on the road for 2 hours, you're almost there. So away from everything, just us in the forest. Even as an awkward teenager, I was climbing trees and being a weirdo. No wonder I didn't have any friends. I got into foraging. Foraging's what I do the most, teach about the most. You know, I was very interested in food and health. I started out as a vegetarian at 19 years old. I then, after my first daughter was born, I went vegan. And shortly after that, raw vegan. And then even more pushed the boundaries further to fruitarian. That was interesting. And then I'm like, well, how much further can I push it? How much closer to the actual plant growing out of the ground can I get? So here comes foraging. Actually going out, because I was already gardening. I was growing a lot of my own food. I had my whole front yard had turned into a garden. But I was like, that's cool, but I bought the seeds at the store. and some came from somewhere else. And I made this. I made it specifically here for this plant. So what if I go out and I just find something that's already doing its own thing without my interaction? And that there brought me to foraging for anything from mushrooms to berries and greens and all that good stuff. But what the text here says, I thought the foraging was just about getting something to eat. So that was the idea. But it was about a lot more than just getting something to put on my plate. So foraging is not, at first, about eating anything. It's about getting to know the world in which we live. Because you could be like, you know what, I'm really hungry. I'm like, I could go have a snack right now. You go outside and chances are you won't find a whole lot to really satiate yourself. But getting to know the land, getting to know where you're going to find these different plants and berries and flowers and mushrooms, you have to know the land. It's not the supermarket. You don't go down the mushroom aisle and go find your morels. No, you have to know the season, the weather. You have to know the small little microclimates of where these mushrooms grow. And so it's not something you can learn overnight. It's something you have to really dive deep into. You can learn a couple things like, oh, this is stinging nettle and I can eat this, or this is dandelion. Those are really good. But to really get into it, it takes some time and developing a relationship with the land. Not everyone has a desire to connect to nature. I meet those folks all the time, and they're like, I don't need to know about any of this. But that essentially is the one thing that unites all of us. Whether we are Native Americans who, this is our land, this is where we're from, or we're from Europe. That's where we come from. We came from a land somewhere on this earth. And, that's where our ancestors started from. We all came from foragers. Every single person came from a forager at one time in their ancestral line. So whether or not, I'm not a nature person, just walk outside with me and let me show you a few things. I don't think I've ever had anybody end a class of mine and be like, I didn't get anything out of that. Even a bad day foraging is a good day walking in the woods. So what I also teach is 3 components to well-being. First of all, food and medicine, what you put into your body. Medicine meaning, anything that alters your balance of your body. A lot of times we find ourselves out of balance. And herbs and even plant medicine, they help to recalibrate ourselves, help us to rebalance our body into a state of homeostasis and well-being. Also, where your body is, the environment. And then thirdly, because if our environment is bad, it's going to affect both our food and our health. And then community, how your body connects to everything around it, not just people, but also how you relate to the land as well. Food creates community, and then community creates food, so it becomes this beautiful circle of, as a forager, being the one person to go out and collect everything for your family is not the best way to do it. I'm not going to sit there and shell acorns for 3 weeks straight. I'm going to be bringing in my friends and family to help me do that, to have enough acorn flour to last for the rest of the year. So, we have outsourced most of our things that we used to do ourselves, especially food. So foraging gets us back into being human again, gets us back in touch with it. One of the things also I like to talk about is how the act of eating is our most intimate connection to our environment. You are literally becoming your environment. So don't be fast, easy, and cheap. Like I said, developing a relationship, knowing where the different plants and the different mushrooms grow. You're eating fresh, you're eating seasonally, you're eating things that haven't been contaminated, hopefully, and really get to know your food. So, plants and mushrooms, there's all this new studies out there how we're learning that they are communicating with their environment. The mushrooms, the fungi are connecting and communicating with the trees and the plants and their environment around them. So how can we join in on that conversation? So by eating from the land, we then are able to get a little bit of that information from them. You are what you eat. So getting into more, with mushroom hunting, I started out with just, foraging with plants and berries and things that you're going to see every time you go for a walk for the most part. The same trees. I know where all the acorns are, where the cherry trees are, and where all these different plants are. But mushrooms are a little trickier. That's when it got a little more challenging as a forager. I can go pick dandelions in my front yard all day, but when it comes to mushrooms, they may only come up once a year, or maybe not even once a year, maybe every couple years, depending on the rain, depending on the weather, depending on all of these different elements that affect them. So once I got into mushroom foraging, mushroom hunting, then things really changed. I was really looking at maps and okay, the water's going to be here because there's this slope on this mountain, and the sun hits the south side, not the north side, so there's going to be more shade here. So by becoming a mushroom hunter, I really got the opportunity to read the land, the language of the land. And then they told me where the mushrooms are. The more we become connected to our food, our medicine, where it grows, the more we are aware of the state of the environment. A lot of new foragers will ask me, well, the dandelions are growing on the side of the road. Should I eat those? I'm like, what do you think? Is there trash? How does it look? Does it look like it's a pretty high traffic area. Probably wouldn't want to eat those. But I also tell them, why don't you go drive down the 101? And do you see all those farms on the side of the road? They're like, oh, did you know those are organic farms right next to the freeway? And it begins to shift this idea of that's interesting. Maybe I don't want, maybe I'm not getting the full picture when I see this beautiful shiny box at the store of strawberries that says organic. Maybe it's right next to the freeway and there's all of this pollution that it's absorbing as well. So it begins to open up the eyes of people who begin to see things a little differently. So the more aware, the more we care to do something about it. So getting more into food, going a bit deeper. I do travel a lot. And the cool thing about being a forager that travels is I get to taste what different places, I get to experience what different places taste like. So what does the forest taste like? What does the desert taste like? What does the Alaskan tundra taste like? Ooh, interesting. So hopefully you can see, I like to get a little creative with my food, because the first foraging class that I took, the teacher served a plate of looked like lawn clippings. I was like, well, yeah, it's edible, but that just doesn't look like it's going to taste very good. So that gave me the idea that people aren't going to want to, you're teaching that all these things are edible, but they're not going to want to eat these if it doesn't look good. So bringing in my art background, changing up the aesthetics a little bit, and suddenly we have Michelin star looking food that came straight from the forest. So that's been a fun journey, doing different things with mushrooms, really exploring things. And did you know you can make a waffle from a puffball mushroom? What? I know, that one got some weird reviews, but it was a new idea. So also the third component, back to what I was talking about before, connection, bringing people who love the outdoors together has been an incredible experience, and seeing the change of these strangers who say I'm doing a wild food dinner, and it's a table of 20 strangers at the beginning of the meal, and by the end we have people who have shared this experience. Food is an amazing connector, especially when it has come from the environment that you're literally sitting in, and then now all of these people have shared that experience. Especially after one of my longer term, week-long adventures. We arrive as strangers and we leave as family, and still very connected to most people that come to my events. People, happy faces, my daughters, they don't like mushrooms, but that's the way it goes. My older one has heard about these special mushrooms. She's 14. We'll see about that. So, what does this mean for the future? Why would anybody even care about foraging? But as our world becomes more automated, more artificially intelligent, I feel like the best way for us to hold on to our way of being human is through nature. And like I said before, all of us are connected through nature somehow, somewhere. Anyways, so I shared a bit about my journey earlier. It's quite a roundabout way, and by taking the psychedelic shortcut, jumping into it a little bit sooner, and going on to the journey back to ourselves, we can, using plant and mushroom medicine, we can help regain balance in our body and mind. So helpful psychedelics are helpful making when big shifts are needed. And these here are wild psilocybin containing mushrooms. So these are not LNI, but the other ones, wavy calf, cyanescens, yeah. Psilocybe cyanescens found in wood chips in a restaurant landscape. It's all-you-can-eat Sizzler salad bar. Literally, that was the restaurant we were at, and there were thousands of all-you-can-eat mind-changing mushrooms, and everybody just walking right past them. I'm actually going to be talking about a different genus of mushrooms, Amanita. So Amanita muscaria is the most iconic and recognizable mushroom that there is. It's the red and white speckled mushroom. It's your emoji mushroom. It's a Super Mario's brother mushroom. It's the Santa Claus mushroom. It's the one known pretty much all around the world. I'm going to first briefly talk about the whole genus of Amanita, genus meaning family in a sense, which is one of my top favorite, as just a mycologist, someone who studies mushrooms, it's my favorite genus because it includes some of the best edible, as in culinary, and also medicinal, as in psychotropic, and also the most deadly species of mushrooms. So all in one big family. And here's just a couple edible, very tasty species. This one's the Amanita, the Jackson's Amanita, found on the East Coast. This is the blusher mushroom. It's fairly tasty. And then my top favorite Amanita to eat is the Amanita villosa, which grows all around Southern California. But there's also the deadly species. We have this one here called the death cap. That's the Amanita phalloides. And there's another one that's pure white called Amanita. It's the destroying angel. And Bisporigera is the East Coast version. The West Coast version is escaping my brain right now. But absolutely deadly poisonous. So when identifying your Amanita mushrooms, it's very important you have the right one. Does not have red speckles on it, or red and white speckles here, so at least the Amanita muscaria is quite easy to identify. And here is our Amanita muscaria, the classic red and white one. But on the East Coast, you're going to find the Amanita muscaria variety Gasawii, and it's a yellow and orange variety. And then also there's another one, it's brown color with the white speckles. And those are the panther Amanitas, Amanita pantherina. So Amanita muscaria is a mycorrhizal mushroom. And that's very important because it is a classification of mushrooms that are not able to be cultivated. You can't grow these at home. So that means you get to be a mushroom hunter. That's what I've been talking about. Getting to know where these live. These live in the northern hemisphere. They're starting to make their way around south as well as people move about. But they live mostly in pine forests and pretty seasonal. So whenever the rains are, for California and the Pacific Northwest, fall and winter is your time to collect these. Furthest south that I've seen them once in the San Bernardino Mountains, only one time. But usually I would say the lowest I've seen them is around like San Luis Obispo area, and then further up they're just everywhere, all over. And then to the east, Arizona and the Rocky Mountains, all over out there as well. They're in the summertime, East Coast summer as well. So we have a few different groups of Amanita muscaria, or the psychoactive groups. The Amanita muscaria group. This is a group of mushrooms. There's quite a few variations. These have more ibotenic acid in them, which are going to cause a lot more the irritation, the delirium, the undesirable effects. But we can process those to make it more enjoyable. Amanita pantherina. So these are going to have a lot more psychoactive effects. They're a lot stronger. But again, these are going to I have not worked with them myself yet. Some people who do, I do know somebody who really likes them, and he is a very crazy person. And I don't know if it's because of that, but I would give some credit to that theory. There's a couple others that have some psychoactive activity, and that's the Amanita crenulata group and the Amanita gemata group. I do see a lot of the gemata species in Northern California. but those are going to be fairly mild. So I don't have tons of pictures to go through with all those different groups. There are a lot of differences, but for this presentation, we're going to just focus here on the Muscaria group. So the chemistry, so the two main alkaloids in the Amanita muscaria is ibotenic acid and muscimol. So the ibotenic acid is the one that you really don't want in what you're preparing, because that is what's going to cause all the bad things. More delirium, more dizziness, more you see things that are larger than they're supposed to be, or they're smaller than they're supposed to be. Makes it not so much fun. So it's more of a stimulant, causes all the gastrointestinal distress, so we want to minimize that. So it's very closely related to muscimol, which is the other, that's the one we want. But we can convert it because we just have to decarboxylize it by heat. Muscimol, the primary psychoactive agent here, is more of a depressant, so it's going to help bring you into a more relaxed state. It resembles the neurotransmitter glutamate, and so it binds to the GABA receptors in our brains, making us relaxed. There's also muscarine, which is a smaller, lesser important compound as well, but it does cause some excessive perspiration, salivation, nausea, and vomiting. And it does, though, I did see a study on it, that it stimulates the muscarinic receptors, which provide substantial neuroprotective action. So doing some good there. As far as dosages, very wide potency, a variety of potency between regions, like where you're collecting it, and between the actual different mushrooms. So some of them are, you could pick one that is right next to another. One's going to be super strong and one's going to have no effect at all, which makes dosing incredibly difficult. So you never know what you're going to get. And let's see. So general recommendation, I would start very small until you're familiar with how it feels, and then, gradually go up. But a low dose is considered one or small medium-sized cap. So when we're looking at like psilocybin type mushrooms, we're looking at very small amounts of grams. But with these, you're going to be, the cap sizes can be pretty large. And like I said, for a low dose, there's just one small cap, so maybe like that big, maybe that big. An average dose is going to be 1 to 3 medium-sized caps. So this is, pretty large amounts here. Higher dose is going to be 2 or more medium-sized caps. And what does it feel like? So it can range, again, from a whole different types of experiences. A dreamlike state, everything you feel kind of just out of it, slightly euphoric, drowsy, visual distortions, things, the whole Alice in Wonderland thing where stuff looks like, oh, that's actually really tiny, but it's, really normally that big, or, sizes look different. Can go either way. Muscle spasms, loss of balance. I hear a lot of people, they're trying to walk through the forest eating these things, and they end up like they can't walk straight because they're falling and tripping. Muscle spasms, blissful or terrifying sensations, visual and auditory impairment, nausea, gastrointestinal distress, dissociation, delirium, depressant, muscle spasms, difficulty concentrating, macropsia and micropsia. That's what I was saying about the, perceiving things smaller or larger than they really are. Sounds like a fun time. Yeah. So how do we prepare it? Dehydration breaks down some of the ibotenic acid. You want to make them super crispy dry, even though they're going to be a lot more potent if you prepared them fresh. But, I'm not going to necessarily be taking these as soon as I'm finding them in the forest. So dehydration generally is what I would do first. Save them for later. Make sure, cracker dry. You don't want any moisture in there until you're ready to use them. And then making a water extract or a tea after dehydrating them. So you're going to be converting even more of that ibotenic acid into muscimol. Because it is water soluble but thermostable, meaning the longer heat that you are applying to it is not going to destroy any of that muscimol. It's going to stay in there the entire time. You can also adjust the pH using citric acid, which converts even more of the ibotenic acid. I would say like a 3 hour 150 minutes to 3 hours. It's kind of a good range of doing that. But you want to get your pH down to 2.7. So I have an electronic pH reader and just keep testing it, and it's going to be an extremely sour beverage by the time you're done at 2.7. So traditional uses is they call it the third filter, which is a human or animal body, because the body naturally is going to convert ibotenic acid into muscimol. So by using urine of someone that has eaten it, you can then have some nicely prepared beverage ready to go. But it's not my deal. So other uses. Sometimes people are a lot more... I'm also fascinated by the other uses. Topically, you can use it for pain relief and anti-inflammatory, also stimulant, and anti-anxiety as well. So topically and internally, more of a medicinal mushroom as opposed to, going on a trip, sort of thing. Anti-tumor and memory protecting properties. A lot of studies out there on that. So it's pretty interesting where we're finding this could be useful in a lot of different ways. So there's also so many people out there reporting that it's good for pretty much whatever ails you. I've seen many lists that just go on and on about everything. But some I see most often are like symptoms related to Lyme disease, tinnitus, substance dependence, withdrawal, depression, and other conditions. Also, people are microdosing them as well. I have not done that, but I think that might be interesting. So you're getting some effects, but not, going into all the delirious state that could be challenging on your everyday life if you were to do it regularly. Also, as a culinary mushroom, you could sit down and have a meal of Amanita muscaria without any effects whatsoever. But to do it that way, boil it for 7 to 10 minutes, strain and discard the water, which is going to have all that ibotenic acid and muscimol in the water, which you could drink that water and have your dinner as well. You have dinner in a movie. Then you would just prepare it as you would any other mushroom. Here I really enjoy making the stems into pickles because the stems are hollow and it makes a fun little pickle shape. And then you serve it at a class, and people are like, I'm not eating Amanita muscaria. It's okay. Gotcha. All right. So that is That is Amanita muscaria. I'll stop for just a second in case anybody has any questions on that before I talk about a couple other things.
So if you just got like dried Amanita, because like I probably won't forage for some. Well, I would like to, but realistically, that's probably not happening. If I got like 10 grams of dried Amanita online, and just boiled them and drink 5 grams, would that be like, to get down to 2.7? Would that be like pretty useful? Because it's hard when you're like, okay, big cap, small cap.
Yeah.
Dried. Would that probably be a good starter dose? 5 grams for me and my buddy?
I would try that, yeah. That would be a good start. And then, like where are you getting them from? I know that even just elevation changes the potency as well, where they're growing. So like the ones in the Rocky Mountains, I've eaten those raw, just out in the field, and feel no effect from them. Super tasty, like one of the, top tasty raw mushrooms. But I'm just gonna give it a try. 5 grams seems like a good starting level. Yeah.
When you're foraging, how much do you clean them off, or just make sure there's not?
Well, so bugs are extra protein.
Or like bacteria, parasite kind of thing that you can get.
Not really. I'm not too overly thorough with cleaning them. There's in wild mushrooms, there's always going to be bugs. If I'm gonna go nibble on a cap raw, I'll dust off if there's pine needles or dirt on there. Look to see if it's a nice fresh, it hasn't been eaten up by bugs too much already. But yeah, not too worried about it. And if you're cooking it, you're going to be cooking off any bacteria or anything like that as well. So I generally say that, you should be cooking your mushrooms for the most part. All mushrooms, just because it makes them easier to digest. And eating them raw, I would recommend that very sparingly. And of course, you never know what potency the mushrooms have wherever you get them from. Anybody else? Yeah.
Well, the body as a filter and the urine. Like the first person has to sacrifice and eat them raw.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's best to use reindeer because their bodies are already equipped to handle all of that. They naturally eat them anyways, so they don't feel those effects. And I like making a tea. So I don't have any experience on that side.
You have a reindeer and you eat it and you cook it.
Yeah. Yep. We talked briefly for a minute about my trips to Mexico. I do a week-long trip to Oaxaca. It does include a guided adventure, mushroom adventure ceremony. We go out in the woods, we look for mushrooms, we come back, we do a Temazcal ceremony, sweat lodge, and then we are offered mushrooms, and they may sometimes be the size of your forearm, which last year we had a couple of those, and a few folks partook in consuming an entire one. I was like, go you. I went for smaller, but so that's pretty fun. Life-changing, I would say, for many people. And that's about it. I have a book. There's my book, and there's my wild food foraging program that is coming up. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, REI actually carries it as well. I do all my own photography. all my own writing. I don't use AI. And that, there you go. That's me. That's my Instagram, Jess.Starwood. I'm really hard to not find.